I'm Mary Allison Brown. I'm a mental health therapist and a coach, and I'm on a mission to redefine self-care. Welcome back to Self-Care Redefined. We are on episode 2 of our 5 Pillars of Foundational Self-Care series. So the 5 Pillars of Foundational Self-Care are an evidence-based framework of simple things that you can do every single day to support mental and emotional health and well-being. Today, we are going to be diving into the pillar of sleep. Here with me today is Beatrix Schmidt. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. Beatrix is a sleep coach, professional sleeper, professional speaker, and the author of the Sleep Deep Method. So thank you so much for being here once again. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work? Tell us about the Sleep Deep Method.
Yeah, so my journey to discover even this methodology that I now work with started back in my mid-20s when I struggled with insomnia as well. So I think, when we were going to talk about sort of the self-care element, there was nothing physically wrong with me, but I was just neglecting myself more and more and more, which developed into a sleep problem and insomnia. So, this is going to be definitely something that I've gone through and come out at the other end. And the Sleep Deep method is very much a combination of different principles, different methodologies, different tools and techniques that can help someone to develop great quality sleep. And this entire methodology is all about sleep skills. And what are those practicalities? Not just the science. The science is really great and it's very important, but a lot of the times people can't transfer the science into the practicality. So that's really what the Sleep Deep method is about, is helping people to have a roadmap, really.
I really like how you call it sleep skills, because I'm sure this is a common thing that you hear, but there's this idea that sleep is just natural. It's going to happen. I shouldn't have to do anything special to make it happen. Do you run into that with your clients a lot where they're like, it should just happen?
Yeah. And also the opposite as well. So if somebody, and most of my work is really helping and supporting professionals who have been struggling with their sleep. So, a lot of my one-to-one clients, for example, have been sleeping less than 6 hours for 3 years minimum.
Oh, so my goodness.
You really have the negative impact of that sleep deprivation and struggle in the daytime. So I think, when you look at sleep, more and more in my work, and like I've been working with clients for 6 years now, I needed to find a way to explain easier. And I think, you find this as well within your work. We need to make it approachable to other people as well.
Yes.
For other people. And one of the things that I found is that it's not just about going into bed and pulling the duvet over us. It's what is that preparation? What are those tools and techniques that help us to prepare for sleep physically, mentally, and emotionally? Because all those parts play a role in our ability to be able to really rest and switch off and let go and sleep.
Yes, that makes so much sense. So much sense to me. And I'm trying to write those words down. So you said physically, mentally, and emotionally. So what are some of the things that people can do to prepare themselves physically, mentally, and emotionally to sleep?
So for example, a lot of the times people actually put too much in place. So, we talk about sleep hygiene, we talk about evening routines, and we talk about all those different things. But one of the things that I found over the years is that actually when you have someone who really struggles with sleep problems, what they actually do is almost over prepare. Their entire life is now designed to lead up to sleep, or the worry about, am I going to sleep at night and is it going to be enough? So there's two ends of this scale. For a good sleeper, they don't do anything. But actually, when you look at good sleepers, you have a lot of that preparation, but it's not quite conscious. They just do it because they do it naturally, but they still skills. Whereas the person who struggles with sleep problems, unfortunately, the reality is that so many articles are basically just giving standard advice, which means, just because the article says you should go to bed at 10 o'clock, as an example, it doesn't mean that everybody should go to bed at 10 o'clock, because maybe your body is not designed to go to bed at 10 o'clock, So I think a lot of this is either, what I found is a huge over preparation. Like literally they have a list of things, and if even one of them is missing, they now really worried that they're not going to sleep. So
it becomes fixation.
Yeah.
Right. So when I was looking through your website, I was really noticing that you have a very individualized approach. And I love that, because that's exactly how I talk about self-care, because you'll never find, good self-care on a checklist, because that's not you. You need to figure out what works for you. So when you are working with someone who's not sleeping, you said chronic sleep deprivation, how do you help them really tune into their individual needs and what they need to do to become great sleepers?
So I guess this is where you look at the, let's say, 3 steps, right? But those 3 steps, and this is again one of the most important things, is you've got to take into account where you are at personally, and that is one of the biggest things that I keep saying over and over again. So the first step is, as you know as well, is self-awareness. What are the things that are currently working, and what are the things that are not working? And that's where I start with my clients. And also the other thing that we also have to start with is really recognizing the seriousness of the problem.
Yes.
A lot of the times when I come across people, professionals, they might be sleeping really badly, but they pretend they're okay. I'm fine, I'm okay, I get through the day, and almost we put on this brave face about, but I achieved something during the day. Of course, that's really great, and it helps you to move forward in life, but it's not helping when it comes to this self-care and sleep element. We've got to acknowledge if there is a problem. And again, just here, before I go into the steps, a lot of the people don't even know that there are 65 different sleep disorders that are diagnosable.
65?
65.
Wow.
They fit into different groups. And a lot of people don't even know whether or not they actually have a disorder, a sleep disorder, or it's just that it's a lifestyle problem, right?
Now, if they do have a disorder, is the treatment the same? Are we still learning the same skills?
No, it's different. Because, for example, if the sleep problem is rooted in a physical problem in the body, you treat it differently than if it's a lifestyle and habit problem.
Makes perfect sense.
Right? This is the first thing, is you've got to establish what is the root of that sleep problem. And often, again, what I find is people don't go deep enough to look for the root, and they just settle for, let's say, a lot of the times I hear, I'm just stressed and my stress is causing my sleep problems. But stress is one thing. It's how you're able to deal with stress is the difference. I get stressed too, but it doesn't mean that I don't sleep well, because I have the tools and the techniques. But on the opposite side, which is more the sleep disorder side, let's say someone is going through one of the most commonly known sleep disorders is sleep apnea, which means that at night, the body stops breathing. So they might wake up tired, just like a person who struggles with insomnia, but the dynamic is different. If somebody is really struggling with something like a sleep apnea problem, the habits won't change the outcome, because it's a physical disorder, not a habit or problem. That's probably the best way to describe it. And that's just one of the 65 different sleep disorders. So
That makes perfect sense. I was reading something the other day that said that in the past, we really thought that sleep problems were always physical or the result of a mental health disorder, but that now we know that actually lack of sleep exacerbates many mental health conditions. And I can see that definitely in my practice. Is that something that you see as well?
Oh, absolutely. And they go hand in hand. And I think, one of the biggest things is that if somebody is struggling either with a physical disorder or they've gone through surgery or any of those physical things, they then affect the other two. They affect the mental state, they affect how we feel about how successful we were in the day or how much we achieved or have we crossed off everything from our to-do list. That's kind of the mental pressure side, or even our drive to succeed. We've all met high achievers who will continue pushing their boundaries. And then it affects the emotions. When we feel sad, we're not going to necessarily be able to switch off because we need to be able to deal with the emotion. And this really, really well.
Yes.
Trauma, any of those extreme traumatic experiences, the body needs to be able to deal with it.
Yes. And what you're speaking to, I read a bit about this on your website as well, that busyness as a badge of honor, which I talk about as well. And there was a quote from your website, from one of your blog posts that I wrote down that said, sleep is a key factor in mental wellness that is often overlooked by busy people. Sleep is so key to mental and emotional health, to physical health, right? Our cells are repairing overnight and all of the things that are happening behind the scenes. Why have we become so dismissive of how important it is? Why are people like, I will power through. I can sleep when I'm dead. Things like that. Why do those things exist?
I think number one, culture. We've, especially in sort of more the Western cultures, to succeed in life is the ultimate life goal, right? Whatever success means to you personally, but to succeed in life is how many times we're being told that it's at a cost. So you've got to give up something to be able to be successful. And a lot of the times, self-care, boundaries, enough hours of sleep, enough me time, those are all the things that are gone because we now think that for our success, we have to give them up. But actually, we don't.
Actually, if we do, we get burnt out and then our body breaks down.
Yep. But again, I think culturally, a lot of my clients, again, one-to-one clients are in their mid-40s, late 50s, even sort of early 60s. And if you look at that generation, hard work was the theme of working life, so it's almost become the normal to not sleep, and therefore they've put up with it. But this is where you see the change. When the body starts to age, it's not going to be able to put up with as much as we could do and did do in our 20s, right? We see that's a physical change. And I think that's where a lot of the people in their 40s, 50s that end up working with me, they see that negative effect. So they can't function the same way. They can't achieve enough. Or they're starting to redefine, like you said, self-care redefining what the life goal is. I don't want to burn out for the sake of success, right?
Yes. And by 40s, 50s, 60s, you have some very well-established patterns when it comes to whatever those issues are around sleep, those lifestyle choices, those habits. So they're coming to you with this problem that I'm guessing they're coming to you because they have no idea how to change that, because it seems like, oh, this is just the way that I am. What do I do?
And a lot of this, I guess self-labeling. Most of the clients that I end up working with will say, oh, I've always been a bad sleeper. But that's not actually true. Often what is the reality is that either their parents weren't able to give them the tools and the techniques to be able to deal with all the stress we go through today, or that either there is an underlying medical problem, again, not diagnosed, right? So there is that level, or that they haven't realized that what they're doing has caused it. So again, you've got that habit side. Some of the people that I work with pride themselves for working long hours. They decided that that's good, but actually it's detrimental to being able to sleep well and care for ourselves. So again, there's a couple of different dynamics. Again, this is where you look at personality traits. Personality traits are really fascinating when you look at this sleep picture, and the tools are different for someone who is intellectual driven, love the business they run or the work they do. They're going to have different tools that they need to someone who's actually not really happy in their job and, I don't know, go to the gym in the evening. So the personality traits really show up in those sort of areas.
That makes perfect sense. I giggled a little bit when you said self-labeling because my 12-year-old daughter has been having some trouble sleeping lately. And she's said that a few times. She said, well, I'm just not a good sleeper. And I'll say, oh, don't you take that on as an identity. Nope, we're not going to do that. Because once you sort of really identify with something, I know, that your brain is going to, through the process of confirmation bias, just look for more evidence to prove to you that you're right. We don't want to do that. So don't label yourself. Even if you're having a hard time sleeping, you don't have to take that on as an identity.
Absolutely. And I think on that note, actually, most of my clients, no matter how not good their sleep is, let's say, they've always done some things that were good. It's never always bad. But the problem is the links between the outcome and the combination of the tools. Every person does some good things to help them sleep, but sometimes it's the combination that actually reverses that, or reverses the outcome, or being able to make it happen. And again, when we look at making it happen, the more you force it, the less it happens.
Right. Because then it becomes a source of anxiety. I can relate to that. I do not have insomnia, but I can relate to that on the, occasional night where it's difficult to sleep and your impulse is to keep checking the clock and start counting down. Okay, well, if I fall asleep right this second, now I have 5 hours. Yeah. And then you don't. And then you fixate and you look, oh my gosh, now I only have 3 hours, and you start to panic, right? So then now you're like elevating adrenaline and cortisol, which is then keeping you awake. So we don't want to overly fixate on it. We can let this be easy, but what are those? I know it's unique and individual for each person, but what are some of those kind of basic things that you look at in terms of habits and sleep skills?
So I think one of the things that I look at as breaking down this big picture sleep in terms of the sleep skills for life area is, first of all, look at what is the problem within sleep. So the 4 pillars is, are you able to fall asleep within half an hour? It's not a switch, it's a process. So a lot of the times people think switching off means within 5 minutes I should be sleeping. But the reality is that it's a process. It's okay if it takes you, most of my clients achieve within this 15 minutes. And again, not by checking the time, but the brain consumes time. So you know how long you've been awake for. But it's okay if it takes you up to half an hour. And that's one pillar. Falling asleep is this process. The second one is sleeping through the night. If you wake up once, let's say go to the toilet, you go back to sleep and you fall asleep straight away, pretty much, or within, again, these 15 minutes or so, that means you haven't ruined your night. That's one of the misconceptions I hear. Again, the more you're awake, the more you get frustrated, the more you're unable to fall back into sleep, right? So that's the second pillar. The third one is your energy levels first thing in the morning. What I found over the years is not everybody wakes up refreshed straight away, even if they had good quality sleep. Sometimes the metabolism, the way their body works, it's again a process. So I look at the first hour after waking and the energy levels there, because sometimes people are just slower to get going, it doesn't have to be a problem. The fourth one is, how able are you to maintain your energy levels during the day? you look at the energy dips. You mentioned nutrition as part of your pillar system.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the times people don't actually nourish themselves enough. They skip lunch, they might not drink enough water, which decreases energy levels by itself. Mm-hmm. So those are the 4 pillars. And I think, first step is which one it is for you, which is the one that's causing you the most problems. When it comes to tips and advice, obviously, as you know, I'm not going to bombard you with a list of 10 or 12. The first is self-awareness. So I get all my clients to keep a sleep diary for the entire time we work together. Because when you put something in place, you've got to be able to monitor whether or not it's working or not. And that's not going to happen overnight. You have to put in a tool or technique in place for long enough for it to actually work, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the biggest things that I would like to advise any of your listeners is trying something for one night does not guarantee that it works or it doesn't. You've got to practically measure the outcome.
Yes. And probably I'm going to ask you, I'm not going to make this assumption, but it would be my guess that you're probably wanting to implement sort of one change at a time, right? So that you can measure what's working.
Absolutely. And again, this is one of the things that I see all the time. People completely change everything and they don't even enjoy the process. So, when we talk about self-care, right, you've got to enjoy your evening routine if you want to put in place one. If you hate doing things, then that's not going to help you fall asleep, is it?
And then you're just resentful of this, that you're trying to improve your sleep by sacrificing everything else. And that's one thing that I just think is so, so important and so key here is that realistic expectations. You talked about it in your first pillar of, people expect that I should be able to lay down and fall asleep the instant my eyes shut and my head touches the pillow. And that's not necessarily accurate. But if you kind of say there's a 30-minute window here, so can you fall asleep within that window? That's a normal expectation. There doesn't have to be so much attachment to like that instantaneous sleep. Yeah. Same thing with this tracking it. I talk to my clients a lot about shrink the change, right? We have to make this small because when you try to manage or change everything all at once, that's a setup for failure. It requires so much mental energy, so much willpower. It's not going to be effective.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So good. So what other types of things do you notice with your clients or with others when we're not getting enough sleep? Oh, this is a 2-part question. So one of the things that I notice, so what's happening when we're not getting enough sleep in a negative way that maybe we refuse to see or don't want to see? And then the other thing that I thought was really cool is that one part of your training is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And I use a lot of CBT in my practice as well and share a lot of that here as well, because I think it's very important to recognize what we do and do not have control over when it comes to thoughts and emotions. So I'm just curious as well how that plays in and that CBT component.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of my work is literally this retraining element, but I phrase it in a slightly different way because I don't need my clients to embrace CBT. But the idea that I want even for you listeners to embrace is I am going to train my body and my mind to be able to sleep well. And that is the core idea of the sleep skills for life, is a set of skills that I can develop that works for my personality type, my lifestyle, and my future goals in life. For example, if you want to be able to fall asleep around about 11 o'clock, why are you going to bed at 10? So I always look at my clients' current life and where you're going to go. Set the tangible, practical sleep goal rather than say, oh, I just want to sleep better. You don't know if you got there.
Mm-hmm. I love that. It has to be measurable in some way. Or what does better mean? And how do you know?
So, for example, a practical sleep goal is, let's say, I want to be able to get 6 hours sleep 5 out of 7 nights. Now that for someone who's been sleeping 5 hours every night and disturbed, that's a huge progress. But that's not, I want to get to 8 hours, which puts too much pressure on us, right? Another sleep goal could be, tangible sleep goal could be, right, I want to be able to fall asleep within half an hour. And maybe previously that person has been tossing and turning and checking their clock, and it's been an hour and they're still awake. Right? And then I think where it comes to this picture of CBT really is one of the biggest parts I see is a lot of people do way too many things in bed. I'm going to read a book in bed to help me sleep. But it's what you're training your body and the mind to do is read while you're in bed, not sleep. So one of the biggest things I look at is removing anything and making the bed for intimacy, if you're in a relationship, or, and sleep only. And I know a lot of the people don't like the idea, but the reality is that's how your brain and your body is going to know that as you're walking towards your bed, the meaning, the guidance, the instructions are not, well, let's see what happens, but they are, I am going to sleep.
Yes, that's so good. I talk to my clients sometimes who are having trouble sleeping about creating healthy sleep associations, which is exactly what you're saying, and not watching TV in the bed, not scrolling on your phone in the bed, because those things are other things that I feel like people tend to be very dismissive of, but so disruptive to sleep, right?
Yeah. And when you, this is one of the things that I tell my clients, if you take your phone to bed with you and you take your remote control and whatever book or whatever else you take to bed with you, what you're literally instructing your brain to do is not sleep, is to do all these things. And I know, and again, I'm going to say an exception to the rule, because again, if somebody is highly anxious and they have a lot of, trauma, things like that, that you can't take everything away and expect it to work. So again, you've got to be gentle, and this is where self-awareness comes in. You've got to look at where you're at and seek the support you need to be able to transition. A lot of my clients can't do it by themselves because they need the support, the reassurance from me as a coach to be able to take them through the process. So again, it looks at the scale. Don't try and do it all by yourself if you're struggling too much. So that part is this behavioral change of, first of all, putting sleep as the top of the priority. Because if you don't, then that's never going to be important enough, right? And then really looking at what works, what doesn't work from that personal perspective. I don't remember the first question that you were asking because I've jumped into the other second one.
That's okay. I was combining two in my head as I was speaking. I was just asking, I think you've covered it actually, just kind of what are some of those negative things, those negative outcomes that you see for people who aren't sleeping well. One of the things that I really love about what you're saying though, is that it is a skill. When you said, I can train my body and my mind to be able to sleep well. To me, that's so powerful because I think, as I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, I think people do make the assumption that because this is natural, it's normal, I should just be able to do it. And then they get frustrated that in fact, you do have to sometimes train your body and your mind to sleep well. And that's okay. And it is a skill. And you're not going to be very good at it at first because you haven't practiced yet.
Absolutely. And I think, I work with different clients from different places. And I think one of the ones that pops into mind literally this week is, the overactive mind, and one of the people who's currently in my group coaching, they basically have a problem. They already recognize that it's an overactive mind problem. And we were doing an exercise and she's like, oh, can I have a downloadable PDF? Because then I can actually look at it in more details. I'm like, stop there. we're not going to go over analyzing, right? Because if I give the person over the PDF, what's going to happen is they're going to even more overanalyze it. And straight away, it was like, oh, yeah, okay, I got it.
And that's one of those things too. I'm sure when people are coming to you, what's required to build this skill is a certain level of trust, and they don't have it yet. And that's why they really need you, right? Because you can reflect back to them, oh, nope, that's an old pattern.
Yeah.
We're trying to change that.
And again, I think this is again a cultural thing. A lot of the times people expect something to change overnight. How many articles you might have read about the 5 hacks for sleeping better, or the secrets, or the best tips, or 5 steps to, and all of that. And it's giving us a false promise, because a lot of the times it's not going to be overnight. You have to have a very superficial sleep problem for it to work potentially overnight, but it doesn't give you the longevity. And so again, when I work with clients, it's a 3-month process. But that 3-month process will last you pretty much a lifetime.
Yes, that's so good. You keep talking about, these smaller steps, and I really like to think of those as these incremental upgrades. However, I think what I see with my clients a lot of the time is that they start to feel anxious because they're like, well, I don't want to be right here. But what they have to recognize is that taking one step in a sustainable way gets you to your goal more quickly. That doesn't have to be the goal, right? You can still build on those incremental steps.
And also, I think a lot of the times there's a huge amount to learn from exactly where you're at. With my clients, we start with where you're at. Learn where you're at. And literally for the first, with my one-to-one clients, the first 10 days, the only thing we do is look at where they're at. Because if you can start actually relaxing about where you're at, we're already started the process. So the self-awareness piece is one of the most fundamental pieces there.
And self-awareness without judgment.
Absolutely.
It's okay.
Yep, absolutely. It's okay where I'm at. And literally, some of the clients over the years, to recognize what are the things that are already good was part of that picture. Because when somebody doesn't sleep well, only thing they tend to see is the negative, but there are some good bits too.
Yes. So having a balanced perspective to see both.
Absolutely. And it starts there. I think, a lot of the times I talk to my clients all the time about there is no perfect sleep. There is optimized sleep. But even I don't sleep well every single night. And I've done 12 years of research on it. It's the body doesn't work, and sleep doesn't work in a perfect way. It works in what are the tools and the techniques that you have to help you be able to deal with the day that affects the night, and then the night that affects the day. It's an up and down process, not a roller coaster, but it is an up and down process. It's as simple as when you have a meal, you'll be more nourished, but it won't come down. You'll be hungry again.
Yes. And I love how you talk about that, the day and the night, because then those things, establishing healthy habits for daytime and nighttime, becomes mutually reinforcing, where a good day leads to a good night of sleep. And then that leads to you feeling refreshed the next morning. I really did love the other piece you said about the energy levels in the morning too, as being also on a spectrum, that it doesn't have to be like the second I open my eyes, I'm awake and cheery, but that within the first hour, because I find that sometimes where I'm a little bit groggy, but I'm always awake within the first hour. So now I know that I'm like within that window of kind of range of normal expectation.
And right, again, in the morning, how much we put ourselves under pressure to function straight away, 100%.
Oh, yes.
But that's not how the body works. That's not. It needs its time,
Yes.
And
that's really freeing just to know that. It feels really liberating just to be like, oh, Oh, okay. So maybe if I work with my body instead of try to force it to do things it's not ready for, maybe that will be more effective.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's, and that's ultimately, that's what relaxation is. So, that's where the evening relaxation also comes from. The more self-aware we are, truly, not because we're either putting pressure on ourselves or we're discarding how we're at, but truly really being honest with ourselves inside, not because other people need us to be, but really truly inside. That's where this starts, because that's what sleep is. When we're in bed sleeping peacefully, nobody's there to tell us how it is. We do it and we feel it in the morning. Again, one of the biggest things with my clients is recognizing that, how do you feel in the morning? That's going to be different. If, let's say, you might have had a bit of a nightmare, that you're going to be in a totally different emotional place in the morning after maybe waking up to a nightmare than you will be if you slept through the night really peacefully. But it doesn't mean that the nightmare is ruined it. It just means that on that night, something has slightly changed and caused this awareness of the nightmare. It's those scales.
Yeah, I love that focus on self-awareness, because it's permission that if things aren't working as well as you would like, that's okay. You have the skills. You can change that. You can shift that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this has been so helpful. Thank you so much. So if people are listening and they would love to learn more about the Sleep Deep method, where should they go?
So literally the website is called the Sleep Deep Method. I'm sure you'll include the link. Yes. And I actually have a second website because of me as a person, as a speaker. So they all combine anyway. But I think, it's a good place to start. And again, obviously, I would encourage people to link up with me, because I do run regular public events, virtual sessions, to start that education. This year I've launched Sleep Skills for Life Masterclass series. So we always look at a different topic on sleep each month, which is a public event. So, it's an introduction to how I can help and what it means. And, if not, then just really start with keeping a sleep diary on paper rather than tracking, because that's another thing.
Yes.
The trackers won't tell you how you feel. It will just tell you some data. So it's important to attach that feeling part to it. And yeah, that's the first steps, really.
Yeah, that's so great. I think track your sleep. If you know that you are not falling asleep within 30 minutes, you're not sleeping through the night, or you're not able to get out of that groggy state in the morning, absolutely follow along with your work and get into those public events and start really thinking about how to build some sleep skills.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And, self-care is so close to this whole picture,
It's part of it. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure.